The rain fell in sheets across the city that night, turning the world into a blur of neon reflections and gray shadows. Most people hurried past with their collars up and eyes down, desperate to escape the downpour. But Olivia Pierce stood frozen outside her apartment building, her umbrella tilted against the wind, her gaze fixed on the huddled figure in the alleyway. He sat with his back against the brick wall, a soaked cardboard sign unreadable in the rain, his clothes clinging to his thin frame. Something about his posture, a certain dignity despite his circumstances, made her pause. He wasn't begging or asking for attention. He simply sat there, enduring, as if he'd accepted whatever fate had dealt him. What happened next would change both their lives forever. The man hesitated, then slowly stood up. His legs seemed stiff, as if he'd been sitting there for hours. "Just until the rain stops," he agreed, picking up a small, worn backpack, his only possession. Olivia nodded and led the way to her apartment building, aware of the curious glances from the doorman. "Good evening, Ms. Pierce," the doorman said, eyes darting between her and the stranger. "Evening, Tom. This is—" She paused, realizing she didn't know his name. "James," the man said simply. "James Wilson." Tom nodded, but his worried expression made Olivia stand taller. "James is my guest tonight," she said firmly, though her heart raced at her own boldness. As they rode the elevator to the 5th floor, Olivia wondered if she had lost her mind. Her mother's warnings echoed in her head. "Never trust strangers, Olivia." But something told her this man wasn't dangerous, just broken. Her apartment was small but neat, a one-bedroom with an open kitchen and living area filled with plants and colorful artwork from her design projects. "The bathroom is down the hall," she said, pointing. "You can take a hot shower if you'd like. I'll find some clean clothes." James looked around the space, taking it all in. His eyes lingered on her bookshelf, then on her laptop where designs for a client project were displayed. "You're a designer," he said, not a question. "Yes, graphic design. I run my own small business." She handed him a towel and some clothes that belonged to her brother, who sometimes stayed over. "They might be a bit big, but they're dry." James took them with careful hands. "Thank you. Most people, they just walk by." "Well, I'm not most people," Olivia said with a small smile. "I'll make some soup while you get cleaned up." While James showered, Olivia called her best friend Mia. "You did what?" Mia's voice crackled through the phone. "Liv, are you crazy? He could be anyone." I know, Olivia sighed. "But you didn't see him, Mia. Something about him. I just couldn't leave him in that rain." "At least text me every hour so I know you're alive," Mia demanded. "I will. I promise." When James emerged from the bathroom, Olivia barely recognized him. Without the dirt and with his beard trimmed, he looked younger, almost handsome. The wet, matted hair was now clean and combed back, revealing a strong jawline and clear eyes. But it was more than his appearance that had changed. He carried himself differently, shoulders straight, head high, as if washing away the dirt had also washed away a disguise. "The soup is ready," Olivia said, trying to hide her surprise at his transformation. They ate in silence at first, James handling the spoon with unexpected grace. His table manners were perfect. Another puzzle piece that didn't fit the homeless man image. "How long have you been—" Olivia searched for the right words. "On the streets?" James finished for her. 6 months. "What happened, if you don't mind me asking?" James stared into his soup. "Life happened. Bad choices. Betrayal. Then one day I just walked away from everything." "Everything?" His eyes met hers, and for a second, she glimpsed something like fear. Everything that didn't matter anymore. They talked about safer topics after that. Olivia told him about growing up in a small town, about her struggle to build her design business in a competitive field. James listened more than he spoke, asking thoughtful questions that showed he was really hearing her. When it was time to sleep, Olivia made up the couch with fresh sheets and a warm blanket. She placed a glass of water on the coffee table. "I have an early client meeting tomorrow," she said, feeling suddenly awkward. "But please, stay as long as you need to, at least until you figure things out." James sat on the edge of the couch. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. Olivia thought about it. Because everyone deserves a second chance, she finally said. And maybe I needed to be reminded that there's still kindness in the world. She locked her bedroom door that night, not out of fear exactly, but because Mia's warnings rang in her ears. As she drifted off to sleep, she wondered about the mystery of James Wilson. Who was he before the streets claimed him? What had he walked away from? Little did she know, the answers were far bigger than anything she could have imagined. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the curtains. Olivia woke with a start, suddenly remembering her unusual house guest. She quickly dressed for her client meeting, then cautiously opened her bedroom door. To her surprise, the apartment smelled of fresh coffee. The couch was neatly made, the blanket folded perfectly at its end. And there was James, standing in her small kitchen, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "I hope you don't mind," he said, noticing her surprised expression. "I wanted to thank you somehow." Olivia accepted the mug he offered. The coffee was perfect, better than she usually made herself. "I have a meeting in an hour," she said, checking her watch. "But there's plenty of food in the fridge. Please make yourself at home." James nodded. "I appreciate it, but I should probably go. I've imposed enough." Olivia frowned. Go where? Back to the alley? The thought bothered her more than she expected. "Look, why don't you stay a few days, just until you figure out your next steps?" James seemed about to refuse, but then he glanced out the window at the city beyond. Something like weariness crossed his face. "Okay," he said finally. "Just a few days." Olivia smiled, relieved for reasons she couldn't quite explain. "Great. Here's a spare key. I'll be back around 3. As she grabbed her portfolio and headed for the door, James called after her. "Good luck with your meeting. Remember, you're selling yourself as much as your designs." The comment stuck with her as she rode the elevator down. How did he know she was nervous about the pitch? And why did his advice sound so professional? The client meeting went better than expected. Olivia landed the contract to redesign branding for a chain of local coffee shops, her biggest project yet. As she walked home, she couldn't wait to share the good news, then caught herself. Why was she so excited to tell a stranger about her success? When she returned to the apartment, she found it spotlessly clean. James had washed the dishes, organized her scattered design magazines, and even watered her neglected plants. But what really caught her eye was her laptop. It was open to her design portfolio website, which now looked completely different. More elegant, more professional, with improved layout and navigation. "I hope you don't mind," James said from the kitchen doorway. "Your site had some issues with the user interface. I took the liberty of making a few adjustments." Olivia stared at him. "You know web design?" James shrugged, but there was something practiced about his casualness. "I've picked up a few skills over the years." "These aren't just a few skills. This is expert-level work." She scrolled through the site, amazed at the improvements. "Who are you really, James?" For a moment, he looked like he might finally open up. Then his expression closed again. Just someone trying to find his way back. That evening, they shared a meal of pasta that James had prepared. Olivia told him about winning the coffee shop contract. "You should increase your rate," he said matter-of-factly. "Based on your portfolio, you're undercharging by at least 30%. Olivia nearly choked on her pasta. "How would you know what industry rates are?" James smiled faintly. "Let's just say I've been on the other side of those negotiations before." Later, as they washed dishes side by side, Olivia's phone rang. It was Mia checking in. "Yes, I'm still alive," Olivia laughed. "Actually, I was wondering if you could help me with something." She glanced at James, who was pretending not to listen. "Could you run a background check on someone for me?" Mia worked in human resources and had access to various databases. "Send me the details," she agreed. "And Liv, be careful." That night, Olivia lay awake, her mind racing. The homeless man on her couch knew too much about business, web design, and professional presentation to be just anyone. His manners, his speech, his advice, all pointed to someone from a very different world than the alley where she'd found him. In the living room, James also couldn't sleep. He sat in the darkness, staring at his hands. 6 months ago, these hands had signed documents worth millions, had shaken hands with business leaders and politicians. Now they were rough from the streets, though the past week of shelter had begun to soften them again. He pulled out his wallet, the one thing he'd kept from his old life. Inside was a single photo of a woman with a warm smile. On the back, written in fading ink, "Remember why we started." James traced the words with his finger. How had he strayed so far from that purpose? When had profit margins become more important than people? He thought of Olivia, her kindness, her passion for her work, her struggle to build something meaningful. She reminded him of himself long ago, before success had changed him. A notification sound broke the silence. Someone had logged into his old email account, an account he hadn't touched in months. Only his former assistant knew the password. "They're still looking for me," he whispered to the darkness. Meanwhile, across town, Mia stared at her computer screen in disbelief. The search results for James Wilson had just loaded, and the face staring back at her was indeed the man Olivia had described, but the attached biography was nothing short of shocking. "Oh my God," she breathed, reaching for her phone. The next morning, Olivia's phone buzzed repeatedly as she got ready for work. 6 missed calls from Mia and a text that simply read, "Call me now. It's about James." Her stomach tightened. Before she could return the call, there was a knock at her bedroom door. "Olivia?" James's voice came through. "There's someone here to see you." She opened the door to find James standing there, looking tense. Behind him in the living room stood Mia, her expression a mix of shock and excitement. "Mia? What are you doing here so early?" Olivia asked. Mia's eyes never left James. "I think you need to sit down for this," she said, placing her laptop on the coffee table. The three of them sat awkwardly in the living room. James kept his eyes down, his hands clasped tightly together. "Just tell her," he said quietly to Mia. "It's time." Mia turned her laptop so Olivia could see the screen. On it was a news article with a familiar face, James's face, but clean-shaven, in an expensive suit, standing in front of a sleek glass building. The headline read, "Wilson Tech CEO disappears. Board declares emergency leadership change." Olivia read aloud. "James Wilson, founder and CEO of Wilson Technologies, has not been seen for 6 months. The company, valued at over $2 billion, has named CFO Robert Caldwell as interim CEO while the search for Wilson continues." She looked up at James, her mind struggling to connect the homeless man she'd found in the rain with the powerful tech CEO on the screen. You're that James Wilson, the one who created the SmartShare platform?" Her voice was barely a whisper. James nodded slowly. "I was." "But why? Why would you leave all that behind to live on the streets?" James took a deep breath. 6 months ago, I discovered that Robert, my CFO and oldest friend, had been selling user data from our platform to advertisers. Personal information from millions of users, without their knowledge or consent. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. When I confronted him, he said everyone was doing it, that it was the only way to keep growing at the rate our investors expected. He had the board on his side. They said I was being idealistic, that this was just business. "So you quit?" Mia asked, incredulous. "I didn't just quit." James turned back to face them. "I walked away from everything, my company, my penthouse, my car, my identity. I couldn't be part of what Wilson Tech was becoming. But I couldn't stop it either, not with the board against me." Olivia tried to process this revelation. "So, you've been homeless for 6 months because of principles?" James smiled sadly. "It sounds crazy when you say it like that, but I built Wilson Tech to connect people, not exploit them. Once I saw what it had become, I couldn't go back and pretend everything was fine." Mia looked at her watch. "I hate to break this up, but I have to get to work. Olivia, we need to talk later." She gathered her things and headed to the door, then turned back. "For what it's worth, Mr. Wilson, what you did was honorable. Stupid, but honorable." After Mia left, silence hung heavy in the apartment. Olivia stared at the man she thought she'd been helping, now realizing he could probably buy her entire apartment building if he wanted to. "Why didn't you tell me?" she finally asked. "Would it have made a difference?" James replied. Would you have treated me the same if you knew I was a CEO on some kind of moral sabbatical rather than just another homeless man? Olivia considered this. Probably not, she admitted, but I still would have helped you. That's exactly why I liked being around you, James said softly. You helped me because you saw someone who needed help, not because of who I was or what I could do for you. Do you know how rare that is in my world? Olivia felt her cheeks warm at his words. So what happens now? Are you going back? James ran a hand through his hair. I don't know. Robert and the board have probably changed everything by now. And to be honest, I'm not sure I want that life back. Olivia couldn't believe what she was hearing. You would give up billions of dollars? For what? For peace of mind? James suggested. For the chance to build something new, something honest? The conversation was interrupted by James's phone, a basic prepaid model, ringing unexpectedly. He answered, his expression changing as he listened. How did you get this number? He asked tensely. Then, I see. Yes, I understand. He hung up, looking troubled. What is it? Olivia asked. That was my former assistant, Emily. She's still loyal to me, it seems. She says Robert has been searching for me. Not out of concern, but because the company is in trouble. A major data breach last month exposed what they've been doing. Their stock is plummeting, and users are leaving in droves. Olivia sat beside him on the couch. Is that why you left? Did you know this would happen? James shook his head. I suspected something would eventually go wrong. These things always do. But I didn't cause this, if that's what you're asking. What will you do? James looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since his identity had been revealed. I need your help, Olivia. Not as a homeless man this time, but as someone who's lost his way. I built something that mattered once. I think I can fix this, but I can't do it alone. Olivia felt the weight of his words. 1 week ago, she was just a graphic designer struggling to make ends meet. Now she was being asked to help a billionaire tech CEO reclaim his company. Why me? She asked. You must know hundreds of people more qualified. Because you see things differently, James replied. You reminded me why I started Wilson Tech in the first place, to help people connect, not to exploit them. And because you were kind when you had nothing to gain. Outside, the city continued its busy rhythm, unaware of the decision being made in the small apartment above its streets. 2 people from different worlds, brought together by chance. Or perhaps something more. Okay, Olivia said finally. I'll help you. But we do this right. No shortcuts, no compromises. James smiled for the first time that day, a real smile that reached his eyes. No shortcuts, he agreed. It's time to rebuild. Not just the company, but trust. Little did either of them know that across town, Robert Caldwell was staring at a computer screen showing a social media post, a photo taken by a coffee shop patron the previous day. In the background, barely visible but unmistakable to those who knew him, was James Wilson, sitting across from a young woman with auburn hair. Find out who she is, Robert instructed the private investigator on the phone. It seems our missing CEO has finally surfaced. The next few days were a blur of strategy and planning. Olivia's small apartment transformed into a makeshift headquarters, with her living room covered in sticky notes, printed documents, and her laptop constantly humming. We can't just march into Wilson Tech and demand things change, Olivia said, pinning another note to her wall. Robert has the board's support and he won't give up control easily. James sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by financial reports and tech industry magazines. You're right. We need a smarter approach. Emily, James's former assistant, had been helping them remotely. She sent encrypted emails with insider information about the company's current state. The data breach had done serious damage. User trust was at an all-time low, and competitors were circling like sharks. The key is proving what Robert did, James explained. Not just the data selling, but how it damaged the company's core mission. Olivia's design skills came into play. She created visual presentations that showed how the company's unethical practices had destroyed its reputation. Each graph told a story of betrayal and lost trust. We need evidence, she said. Something concrete that can't be denied. James's phone buzzed. It was Emily again. "I've found something," her message read. Internal emails that prove Robert knew about the data breach months before it went public. But getting them out won't be easy. The tension was building. Olivia could see James was struggling. This wasn't just a business problem, it was personal. He had built Wilson Tech from nothing, turning a small startup into a multi-billion-dollar company. And now someone else was destroying everything he'd worked for. One evening, as they worked late into the night, Olivia brought James a cup of coffee. Their hands touched briefly, and something passed between them, a connection deeper than friendship, but not quite romance. "Why did you really start Wilson Tech?" she asked softly. James looked surprised by the question. "My mom," he said after a moment. "She worked 3 jobs to support me after my dad left. Always said technology could help people connect, make life easier. I wanted to prove her right." Their planning was interrupted by a knock at the door. Both froze. "Are you expecting anyone?" James whispered. Olivia shook her head. The knock came again, more insistent this time. James moved to the window, carefully peeking out. "It's Mia," he said, relaxing slightly. Olivia opened the door, but it wasn't just Mia. Behind her stood a man in a sharp suit, looking completely out of place in the hallway. "We need to talk," the man said. The man introduced himself as Michael Chen, a senior investor in Wilson Tech. He had been tracking James's movements and wanted to hear his side of the story. "The board has been lying," Michael said. "What Robert's doing is destroying everything we built." This was their first real ally. Michael had access, connections, and a network that could help them expose the truth. "I can get you those emails," Michael said, sliding a USB drive across the table. "But you'll need to move fast. Robert knows someone is coming for him." As Michael left, Olivia turned to James. "Are you ready for this?" James looked at the USB drive, then at Olivia. "I'm ready to make things right," he said. "Not just for me, but for everyone who believed in Wilson Tech." Outside, a black SUV sat parked across the street. Inside, a man watched the apartment, speaking quietly into a phone. "He's found an ally," Robert Caldwell said coldly. "Time to make our move." The evidence was explosive. Emails, financial records, secret memos, all proving that Robert had systematically betrayed the company's core values. Michael Chen had been right. Wilson Tech wasn't just making mistakes. It was deliberately exploiting its users. "We need to go public," Olivia said, her fingers flying across her laptop keyboard. She was designing a presentation that would expose everything. James looked worried. "It's not that simple. Robert has connections. If we make one wrong move, he'll bury us before we can tell the truth." Their plan was risky. They would expose Robert at the upcoming Wilson Tech quarterly board meeting, the one event where all major shareholders would be present. Michael Chen had helped them secure an invitation, but getting inside would be just the beginning. The morning of the meeting arrived. Olivia wore a tailored suit, a far cry from her usual casual design office attire. James looked like the CEO he once was, confident and focused. "Remember," he said as they approached the sleek Wilson Tech headquarters, "we have one shot at this." The boardroom was intimidating, a massive space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Corporate executives sat around a massive glass table, chatting quietly. Robert Caldwell sat at the head of the table, looking calm and in control. When James walked in, the room went silent. "Well, well," Robert said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "The prodigal CEO returns." Olivia squeezed James's hand supportively. He stepped forward, a USB drive in his hand. "I have something to share with everyone," James began, but Robert was prepared. "Security," he called out. "Please remove these guests." That's when Michael Chen stood up. "Not so fast. As a major shareholder, I demand they be heard." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Security guards hesitated, caught between Robert's command and Michael's authority. James connected the USB drive to the main presentation screen. Suddenly, emails, financial records, and user data reports filled the massive display. Each document told a story of betrayal, of how Robert had been selling user data, manipulating the company's core mission, and lying to everyone. These documents prove that Wilson Tech has been systematically breaking user trust, James said calmly. Every privacy violation, every unauthorized data sale, all traced directly to Robert's office. Whispers erupted around the boardroom. Some executives looked shocked. Others looked angry. A few looked guilty. Robert's calm facade began to crack. This is nothing but desperate lies from a CEO who couldn't handle the pressure. But the evidence was overwhelming. Emily, James's loyal assistant, had meticulously collected every single document. Nothing could be denied. As the board began to discuss, Michael Chen took charge. I move to have Robert Caldwell immediately removed as interim CEO and have James Wilson reinstated. The vote wasn't even close. Robert was done. In the chaos that followed, James felt a mixture of relief and sadness. This was the company he'd built, the dream his mother had inspired, and it had nearly been destroyed by greed. What now? Olivia asked him later after the meeting. James looked at her, the woman who had changed everything by showing kindness to a stranger in the rain. Now we rebuild. The right way. Outside the Wilson Tech building, news vans were already gathering. The story was breaking, a tale of a CEO who walked away to save his company's soul, and the unexpected hero who helped him do it. Robert was led away by security, his career in ruins. But this was more than just a corporate takedown. It was a message about trust, about doing the right thing, even when it seems impossible. As James and Olivia walked away hand in hand, the city seemed to breathe with possibility. Sometimes hope comes from the most unexpected places. 6 months after the board meeting, Wilson Tech looked completely different. The company had been transformed. New privacy policies, transparent data practices, and a renewed commitment to user trust became their hallmark. Olivia now worked as the company's chief design officer, bringing her creativity and ethical vision to every project. James stood at the window of his modest office, much smaller than his previous executive suite. He could have reclaimed his old space, but that wasn't what mattered anymore. "Ready for the press conference?" Olivia asked, walking in with 2 cups of coffee. James smiled. Today, they were announcing a new foundation, the Wilson Tech Community Fund. It would provide technology resources to underserved communities, exactly the kind of project his mother would have loved. The story of how James went from CEO to homeless and back had become legendary in tech circles. Business magazines wrote about second chances. Social media celebrated a corporate leader who chose ethics over profit. But for James and Olivia, it was more than a story. It was a life changed by one simple act of kindness on a rainy night. Emily, now their chief of staff, knocked on the door. "The shareholders are waiting," she said with a smile. As they walked out, James remembered that night in the alley. How different everything could have been if Olivia hadn't stopped, if she hadn't offered help to a stranger. "Some people might call it luck," James said to Olivia as they walked. She squeezed his hand. "I call it choosing to see the humanity in others." The press conference was packed. Journalists, tech bloggers, community leaders, all waiting to hear about the new direction of Wilson Tech. James took the podium. Behind him, a simple message was projected. Technology connects, humanity matters. It wasn't just a corporate slogan. It was a promise made possible by an unexpected journey, by one woman's kindness, and by the belief that sometimes the most important technology is the ability to see and help another human being. As cameras flashed and questions flew, James and Olivia exchanged a look. They both knew the real story wasn't about a company or a comeback. It was about hope, about second chances, about the power of a single moment of compassion. And sometimes that's the most revolutionary technology of all. Wow, what an incredible journey we've just shared together. This story of hope, compassion, and second chances could have been just another forgotten moment. But sometimes the most powerful stories start with the simplest acts of kindness. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us, what would you have done in Olivia's shoes? Have you ever experienced a moment that changed everything? What does compassion mean to you? Don't miss our next heartwarming story. Click the bell icon to get notified. Subscribe to our channel. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that kindness can change lives. Every view, every share, every comment helps us continue bringing stories that matter. Real life is full of unexpected connections and beautiful moments of humanity. We're here to celebrate those moments with you. Thank you for watching. Remember, your kindness can be someone's turning point. See you in the next story.